Hey there, welcome to School of Emo, the podcast where we dive into the world of emo, pop punk, and everything in between. If you've ever found yourself in your car screaming the lyrics to Taking Back Sunday, wearing way too much eyeliner in the early 2000s, adding a buckle or a chain to every outfit you've put on, you are in the right place. I'm Erin Judge, and each week I will be your fellow student, guiding you through the music, the culture, and the history that shaped an entire generation of angsty teens. I am not the teacher of this school. I am a fellow student, here to learn alongside you and from you. Together, we will cover a lot of information that doesn't really matter, but will remind us of the days of stalking MySpace channels and getting lost in chat rooms. So connect your dial-up, turn on your webcam, and let's go to School of Emo. Welcome back to School of Emo. Today we are going into a deep dive of a band, and I saw this band live on the Emo's Not Dead cruise last year. Familiar with some of their songs, have really enjoyed listening to more of their songs after the cruise, and going into the deep dive of the band, there's so much I did not know, because I did not follow this band from the beginning. So if you are lightly familiar with the band, you are in for a treat and maybe some surprises along the way as we talk about Saosin. And we're starting in 2003 in Newport Beach, California, with our original lineup, Anthony Green on vocals. That was the surprise to me. And if you followed them, then you know that's not a surprise at all. But I was like, wait, what? I don't know this version of the band because of seeing them live and not knowing the band members apart from the songs before the cruise. But we have Anthony Green on vocals, Bo Burchell on guitar, Justin Shikowski on guitar, Zach Kennedy on bass, and Pat McGrath on drums. The name Saosin, it kind of roughly translates to small heart, which was a concept that Anthony Green described as a reminder not to dwell too much on regret. So kind of he maybe was the one that came up with the name, but where the name originally kind of came from. So in 2003, pretty quickly after they formed, they released Translating the Name EP, which was a 6-song project that would become one of the most influential releases in that post-hardcore history, especially on the West Coast. And it became a bit of a blueprint for this kind of subgenre, this generation of fans. So the high, almost fragile vocals, explosive choruses, technical guitar work, emotional intensity without full chaos, like kind of a different take on emo. We've talked about this before, like what was happening on the West Coast versus the Midwest to the East Coast. Like there was so many different flavors of emo that were coming out of the 90s and really leading into that explosion in the early 2000s, right around 2005, 2006. And so they were part of that on the West Coast. And the twist here is that almost immediately after they released the EP, Anthony Green left the band. So in early 2004, he exited, and the reasons were primarily due to extreme homesickness, depression, and a desire to be closer to family. But that was coupled with creative differences regarding the band's musical direction. And so he felt excluded from the songwriting process and then decided to depart and then eventually form Circa Survive, but then later returned to Saosin. So we're going to get there. But he left. Fans were stunned. The EP had really just started building momentum, and he was a huge part of that. And there was a talk of a full-length album, but then he was gone and there was silence from the band. So the future for Saosin felt really uncertain. Some fans followed Anthony with Circa Survive. Some fans just enjoyed the EP and weren't really sure what was going to happen. Fans that did stay would argue that the departure allowed the band to grow in a completely different direction. Whether that was good or bad, that's up to you to debate. But it really hasn't ended. This is still a debate today, and him being in and out and all the transitions the band has seen with their vocals is part of that debate, which again, I had no idea was even happening whenever I saw them on the cruise last year. And that brings the vocalist I am the most familiar with. In 2004, joining Saosin was Cove Reber. So Cove's voice was a lot smoother and more polished than Anthony's, less frantic. And so in 2006, they released their self-titled full-length debut album on Capitol Records with songs like Voices, You're Not Alone, heavily rotating on Fuse, MTV2, peak MySpace era, fit perfectly within this scene, dominated at Warped Tour, like perfectly placed within that explosion of emo in that 2004-2006 time period. And Saosin, thankfully for them, was right in the middle of it, even with the drama and the changes that the band had seen. So before we move on from this album, we can't overlook the huge hits that still exist, one being You're Not Alone. So the lyrics: it's just like him to wander off in the evergreen park, slowly searching for any sign of the ones he used to love. He says he's got nothing left to live for. He says he's got nothing left. And this time, I think you'll know you're not alone. There is more to this, I know. You can make it out. You will live to tell. She's just like him, spoiled rotten, confused by the lies she's been fed. And she's searching for no one but herself. Her eyes turn to green, and she seems to be happy that she is here. And this time, I think you'll know you're not alone. There is more to this, I know. You can make it out. You will live to tell. You're not alone. There is more to this, I know. You can make it out. We're not alone. There's more to this, I know. You can make it out. You will live to tell. So, with the fans in this album, while it was successful, fans were divided. Those who were fans of Anthony Green would say that this was too polished. And for their newer fans, fans of Cove, they would say this is their best work and would still say today that this is the best work that they've put out. What other side you're on, if you liked the EP more, the first album more, this was the era where the band went from underground to mainstream almost overnight. Not completely, but it felt that way, especially with that kind of reinvention of the band, bringing in Cove right before this album was released. They kept the momentum going. Some years after, in 2009, they released In Search of Solid Gold, which was a darker, more experimental album. This was right around the time that emo was starting to kind of dip down and take a little bit of a pause, if you will, when it came to mainstream success. MySpace era was kind of ending, right? We were starting to shift as a cultural climate and how we experience music. And while that was happening within the scene, within Saosin, things were also shifting behind the scenes. There was creative tensions, label pressure, lineup changes, all of it was mounting. And then they were dropped from Capitol Records, mostly because the album itself didn't hit the way that it was thought to. It didn't have as much success. And then because of that as well, Reber, Cove, was asked to leave Saosin in early 2010. So later reports from the band cited that Cove was asked to leave due to deterioration of his stage and vocal performance, and that he just couldn't perform any longer. So wasn't able to do the job, was asked to leave. What happened was that the same questions from 2004 popped back up. Like, what is Saosin without its voice? Like, what's going to happen without the frontman? And so in 2014, what no one expected, Anthony Green returned to Saosin. So for long-term fans, this felt like a full circle moment. It was something that they had been waiting for, a reunion that most thought was not even possible at this point. This was, 10 years later. In 2016, with Anthony, the band released Along the Shadow, which was their first album with Anthony since the EP. And that brought us songs like The Silver String, which we're going to go through those lyrics, comparing Anthony as the lead, maybe the major songwriter compared to Cove. Who holds the silver string? Lost me to staggered motion. When you run away, whoever changes shape, showing obsolescence, I'll see you there. Alternate the day, scream the last charade, your entropy, the fragment that anchors it all to the wall. Separate the wave, let it go. Drown inside the shade, let it go. The vision that anchors it all into the wall. And I'm forgetting everything you've said, for you to bounce right back, pick up where you left off. When you run away, Whoever tunes my pace, showing obsolescence, I'll see you there. And how it seemed I should be reborn. Alternate the day, scream the last charade. Your entropy, the fragments that anchors it all into the wall. Separate the wave, let it go. Drown inside the shade, let it go. The vision that anchors it all into the wall. In the outline, there's a test where it all gets set on it. There's no structure to my atrophy. There's a padlock on my chest where it all gets hidden in. There's no pattern to my apathy. There's imposters in my atrophy. There's no structure to my apathy. Alternate the day, scream the last charade. Your entropy, the fragment that anchors it all into the wall. Separate the wave, let it go. Drown inside the shade, let it go. The vision that anchors it all into the wall. So this album blended nostalgia with maturity. And it wasn't just a rehash of what happened in 2003, but it felt more like a grown-up Saosin with Anthony's voice incorporated. And when Anthony was interviewed around this time about his return, he described the reunion as healing and a chance to revisit unfinished business. So with this and kind of these changes that had happened through the first 10 plus years of Saosin, fans argued that there were three distinct eras of the band: the Anthony EP era, the Cove major label era, and then the Reunion Legacy era, each with its own identity, almost like three different bands under one name. Which again, I had no idea that this existed. And listening back at the different albums and some of the songs, like, it makes a lot of sense. It's just, if you don't know, you don't know kind of thing, right? Only being exposed to this band from a distance is really interesting to dig into some of the different pieces of it. So looking at their legacy and what was happening during the 2000s, Saosin influenced countless bands during this 2000s scene, even though they weren't necessarily putting out a ton of music, right? There's 3 albums, an EP, an album, and an album. Not that much music compared to some of the other bands even around this time. But the dual guitar, soaring vocal style helped define sounds of bands like Silverstein, Census Fail, Pierce the Veil, and other Warped Tour acts. And then even bands outside of the post-hardcore scene cite 7 Years as a gateway song into this space. So they definitely had an impact on bands, but also fans alike. And then the Anthony versus Cove debate, like, where do you stand? And what happened next? Also a surprise, Cove returned. So he was the band's vocalist from 2004 to 2010. And then he actually returned in March of 2024. So another 10 years later, we have Cove returning to the band. And he joined for their 20th anniversary tour in 2024, performing the 2006 self-titled album in its entirety alongside Anthony. So kind of a dual lead vocalist as well. Currently, Cove has been touring with the band since 2024 and then appearing alongside Anthony Green in kind of that dual vocalist capacity. And as of early 2026, Cove is still associated with the band. Tour dates are scheduled for as early as April 2026 and celebrating the Beatle album. But Anthony Green is not considered to be part of the band. Who knows what actually happens? You know, looking back on the cruise last year, Anthony Green was not there. It was just Cove. And again, that was my experience with the band, like seeing them compared to just knowing the songs. Like I wasn't even really familiar with like music videos, like had never really like dug into them. And so I thought that Cove was just the lead singer. And there were some reports that Anthony is still part of the band and was in 2025. So maybe he just skipped the cruise, had other things going on with LS Dunes. What's happening in 2026? Will they both be together? Will it just be Cove? Will it just be Anthony? I think there's always surprises around every corner and it's not super clear like what's actually going to come from the band, which is so interesting because you don't see those shifts that often. And so it is kind of a fascinating thing of, you know, I was planning to see them again if they come through Nashville. Like they were added to my list of bands that I would love to see live again just because they were such a surprise on the cruise last year and a band I really enjoyed, even if I don't listen to them that often. But now I'm even more curious. I love the work that Anthony Green does in his solo work, as well as Ellis Dunes has been a lot of fun to listen to. And so I've been drawn to his music as well. But to see them perform, not knowing fully what you're going to get, maybe getting the experience of the dual vocalists compared to just Anthony or just Cove, I think that would be so fascinating. So if that is something that you've been able to experience, maybe you weren't sure that there were differences, maybe you followed since the very beginning, so you've seen all the different eras of the band. I'd love for you to share that perspective and that experience and what that was like for you and your take on it. YouTube might be the best place to do that. So if there, you can comment, we can comment back and have a conversation, because it is really interesting. And, ultimately, Saosin is a story of change, about identity, about how a band can evolve and rebuild, but still matter and still have an impact, still have a community that supports them and stands beside them. And so whether you found them through 7 years on LimeWire, You're Not Alone, streaming on Fuse, or Along the Shadows many years later, they likely soundtracked a very specific moment in your life. And that's what emo does best. So my homework for you, this short class today, is to go back and listen to the EP, the first full-length album, and then the Return of Anthony Green in that album. And just listen to the differences, and you get to decide which era do you most connect with. Do you connect to all of them? Do they feel separate? Or kind of looking behind and just taking the music in for what it is, separating the vocalist from the band for a minute? Does it all feel the same? That's your homework. And then in our next class, we will continue our deep dive into bands. We're going to talk about the one and only Mayday Parade, sad love songs coming your way with some other twists and turns of lead vocalists and changes and dual vocalists versus single, all the fun stuff we started today. So I will see you in our next class.